Usually, when we talk about a medical diagnosis, especially in orthopedics, there is this expectation of absolute precision.
Right. It is a highly engineered environment.
Exactly. I mean, we operate in a culture of engineering.
Yeah.
You have a patient with a fractured femur, the x-ray goes up on the screen in theater, and you see that jagged white line.
You point to it and say, there's the structural failure.
Yeah, it is binary, broken or intact. We fix it with a titanium intramedullary nail, a handful of screws, and a rigorously standardized protocol. And that clarity is inherently comforting, because it is visible.
It is a problem that can be neatly categorized and solved.
Right. But the moment you step out of the theater and you try to apply that exact same diagnostic gaze to the architecture of a medical career,
Oh, it falls apart completely.
it really does. When you look at professional trajectory and actual human fulfillment, that X-ray machine becomes completely useless. We find ourselves looking at a diagnostic landscape that is profoundly murky.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. I mean, when the pathology you're dealing with is existential rather than anatomical, the traditional clinical tools we spend decades mastering just fail us entirely.
Because we are trained to look for objective markers.
Exactly. Blood counts, imaging, histology. But how do you biopsy professional disillusionment?
Wow. Yeah. How do you measure that?
You cannot. How do you measure the precise degree to which a career has drifted away from a person's core values? You simply cannot put a number on it.
Welcome to Deep Dive Ortho. If you are listening to this, you are likely a mid to senior medical professional. You have put in the grueling hours, you have cleared the endless regulatory and academic hurdles, and you have built a substantial career.
You've done everything right by the book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to interrogate something that makes a lot of highly accomplished clinicians profoundly uncomfortable. We are going to examine the invisible scripts that dictate career trajectories in medicine.
The default settings, essentially.
Yes, the default definitions of success we operate under.
Yeah.
And more importantly, we need to figure out the mechanism of how those definitions were implanted in us in the first place. So to ground this, let us bypass the abstract philosophy entirely.
Good idea. We need a clinical reality.
Right. Let's look at an anchor case study.
Grounding this in a specific presentation is vital, I think, because the symptoms of this particular pathology are so often masked by external achievement. So what is the presentation we're looking at today?
Well, the presentation is a physician in her late 40s. And if we look at her CV, by every single external metric available to the modern medical establishment, she has decisively won the game.
She has reached the summit.
Exactly. She holds a tenured academic position at a highly respected trust. Her publication record is just formidable.
We're talking consistent output in high-impact journals.
Yeah, a string of first author papers that genuinely influence clinical guidelines across the country. Plus, she has complete financial security, her peers respect her, and the surgical registrars actively fight to be on her firm for mentorship.
From the outside, the life looks entirely frictionless.
It looks enviable. Totally enviable.
A textbook presentation of professional triumph. I mean, she has executed the blueprint flawlessly.
But the chief complaint is entirely discordant with that objective data.
That is the paradox.
It really is. In a quiet moment of reflection, maybe she is driving home from a horrific trauma list late on a Tuesday night, the rain is lashing against the windscreen, or she is just sitting in her office after the final clinic patient has finally been discharged. She admits something terrifying to herself.
That she feels completely unmoored.
Yes, unmoored. She is not clinically depressed, and she is not suffering from the traditional burnout characterized by just sheer physical exhaustion.
It is a different kind of exhaustion.
Right. She looks at all this accumulated success, and she cannot quite identify what it is actually for. The tenure, the papers, the invited lectures, they were supposed to feel like an arrival.
But they do not.
No. Instead, they just feel like an exhausting series of waypoints to a destination that remains completely undefined. She is beginning to suspect she has spent the last 2 decades writing someone else's story.
That is a profoundly painful realization. And unfortunately, it is an epidemic presentation in mid-career medicine right now.
An epidemic.
Absolutely. What we are observing here is the pathology of inherited success. It is a phenomenon deeply, almost invisibly embedded in medical training cultures globally.
How does it start?
Well, from the very first week of medical school, you are handed a highly specific, rigidly structured blueprint for what constitutes a quote-unquote good doctor.
Right, the mold is already made.
Exactly. And because the profession naturally selects for highly driven, compliant overachievers, We take that blueprint and we just execute it without question.
We are selected for our ability to follow complex instructions perfectly. I mean, we take the blueprint, we build the house exactly to the specifications provided, but we never stop to ask if we actually want to live in a house that looks like that.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
It is the professional equivalent of waking up in a bespoke suit that was painstakingly tailored for a complete stranger.
Yes. And it chokes you.
It does. But to actually treat this, to dismantle and correct it, we have to understand that inherited success is not just one monolithic idea, is it?
No, not at all. It presents in several distinct strains depending on the microculture of your specific training program or your subspecialty.
So we absorb these default definitions and act on them as if they are unquestioned laws of physics. Let us dig into these strains. What is the first one?
Well, they operate exactly like background radiation. You do not see it, but it is shaping your cellular behavior. The most pervasive of these strains, particularly if you trained in a major teaching hospital, is the academic ladder.
Ah, yes, the publish or perish mentality.
Exactly. This is the relentless pursuit of tenure, grant funding, and the prestige hierarchy. In this framework, the mechanism of success is defined almost entirely by your academic output.
Which means
It is the underlying assumption that a truly excellent surgeon is not just someone who achieves flawless post-operative outcomes. No, they must also run a basic science lab, secure massive multi-center grants, and publish incessantly.
and the prestige hierarchy driving this is incredibly rigid. I mean, there is an unspoken but deeply felt rule that if you are not operating at a tertiary academic center, you are somehow settling.
Right, that you're just a tradesperson if you are at a district general hospital.
Exactly. But let us look at the mechanics of why that ladder exists. Historically, the teaching hospital model combined clinical mastery with scientific discovery because they were indivisible.
They fed into each other naturally.
Yeah. But the modern medical research complex has evolved into this industrial machine that often rewards sheer volume over groundbreaking paradigm-shifting discovery.
It is about the H-index, not the actual impact on human life.
So you have clinicians sacrificing their evenings and weekends to write these incremental derivative papers they do not actually care about, simply to maintain their grip on a rung of that ladder.
It forces a massive misalignment of energy. I mean, the academic ladder fits a very specific type of mind beautifully.
The true clinician scientist.
Yes. The person who wakes up genuinely thrilled by statistical analysis, trial design, and grant writing. But for the vast majority of excellent clinicians, it is a terrible psychological fit.
But they do it anyway.
They do. They absorb the idea that this is what serious doctors do, so they climb. They spend a decade clawing their way to the top of that ladder, look around, and realize the view does nothing for them.
And when that academic illusion shatters, or if it was never appealing in the first place, something else usually rushes in to fill the void.
Nature abhors a vacuum.
Right. In the absence of a clearly defined internal value system, human beings naturally gravitate towards the most easily quantifiable metric of progress. And in our profession, in our society, that metric is the income trajectory.
The default mechanism.
Yes, assuming that earning more year over year equals career progression.
Income becomes the de facto definition of success by the sheer absence of other definitions.
Because it is easy to count.
Exactly. Subjective values like clinical autonomy, intellectual peace of mind, or deep community impact, they do not have a dashboard. They do not send you a monthly statement. So we optimize for what we can measure.
That makes perfect sense.
A physician rarely starts their career driven primarily by wealth extraction. But because financial compensation is so easily measurable and culturally validated, it becomes the proxy for professional worth.
And you see it happen so insidiously. The clinician starts taking on an extra weekend locum shift, then they expand their medical legal work.
Then they push for a higher volume of private practice.
Exactly. They begin measuring their professional validity by gross revenue generated. And the tragic mechanism here is that this optimization almost always comes at the direct expense of their physical health.
Their cognitive bandwidth, their personal relationships.
They trade irreplaceable assets for a quantifiable high score. But let us pivot to a strain that catches so many brilliant minds completely off guard, the institutional position.
Oh, this one is dangerous. This is the deeply ingrained assumption that career progression inherently means moving up the organizational chart.
The corner office syndrome.
Right. It is the belief that everyone should naturally aspire to be the clinical director, the chief of surgery, the dean, or the chief medical officer, and it relies on a massive cognitive bias.
Which is,
It conflates clinical excellence with administrative capability.
it is the Peter Principle applied to medicine. It is the assumption that if you are exceptionally good at doing the work, like if your revision joint replacements are flawless, your ultimate reward is that you must now manage the people doing the work.
Which is a completely flawed mechanism.
Totally flawed.
The cognitive requirements are entirely different. Management and leadership require a high tolerance for ambiguity, a passion for systems-level problem solving, and an aptitude for navigating really complex human resources disputes.
Whereas
Operating requires hyper-focused, decisive, immediate action. But the institutional hierarchy defines success as proximity to administrative control.
So we take phenomenal surgeons, tap them on the shoulder because it feels like the next logical step, and plunge them into clinical director roles.
And within 18 months, they are utterly miserable.
Drowning in rota gaps and budget spreadsheets.
Completely divorced from the clinical flow state that brought them into medicine in the first place.
It is a double tragedy, really. The individual is miserable, and the patient community loses a master operator to endless clinical governance committee meetings.
A terrible waste of resources.
Which leads us to a strain that thrives on external validation, the reputation metric.
The ego metric.
Yes, the drive for national or international presence. It is the pursuit of named lectures, society presidencies, keynote speaking slots at massive conferences, and just being known in the field.
It is driven entirely by the dopamine hit of external validation. The underlying mechanism here is a reliance on the gaze of others to validate your worth.
Success is defined by your audience size.
Exactly. By how many people know your name and cite your work. Now, for some, driving national conversations is genuinely fulfilling and aligns with their true purpose.
But not for most.
No. For many others, it becomes an exhausting, never-ending treadmill. They spend half their lives eating stale sandwiches in airport hotels, chasing a reputation, while completely neglecting the quiet, profound impact they could be having in their own local NHS trust.
They pursue it because medical culture reveres the famous surgeon above the locally dedicated one.
Right. And underlying all of these strains is the most insidious mechanism of all because it is hardwired into our biology. The peer comparison trap.
On the comparison game.
Medicine is a highly cohort-based profession. You go through medical school with a group, you endure foundation training with a group.
You share the same awful night shift.
Exactly. You develop this deeply ingrained survival-level habit of looking left and right to see how you are doing relative to your peers.
Because we are biologically wired to secure our status within the tribe.
Yes. The neuroscience of relative status dictates that our satisfaction is rarely absolute. It is almost always relative to our immediate comparison group.
Which makes it dangerous.
Very. The sheer tragedy of the peer comparison metric is the shifting goalpost mechanism. It is an unwinnable game.
It is like running a marathon where you are constantly turning your head to check the pace of the runner next to you,
Yes.
completely ignoring the fact that they are running a completely different route with different terrain towards a totally different finish line.
And once you match the pace of that runner, once you achieve what your peers have achieved, what happens? Your brain subconsciously finds a new, more successful peer to compare yourself against.
The WhatsApp group from foundation years just keeps updating with new achievements.
Exactly. It does not produce lasting satisfaction. It produces a chronic, low-grade anxiety that you are perpetually falling behind an imaginary standard.
So let us ground this in how we actually operate. These inherited definitions, the academic ladder, the drive for reputation, the institutional title, they function exactly like using a standard surgical template without checking the patient's specific anatomical variations.
Yeah, a perfect analogy.
You look at the preoperative plan, the angles look structurally correct. The templating software gives you the green light based on broad population averages.
But then you get into theater.
Exactly. When you actually open the joint, the mechanics are totally dysfunctional because you ignored the individual's unique morphology. The template is not objectively bad.
It is just disastrous for this specific patient.
Right. But I have to push back here
Please do.
because there is a very valid counter-argument from the establishment. Aren't these metrics absolutely essential for the survival and advancement of the specialty?
How so?
Well, if everyone rejects the academic ladder, who runs the multi-center trials that establish new standards of care, if everyone rejects clinical leadership, who advocates for surgical resources at the trust board level.
Right.
If we encourage clinicians to abandon these inherited definitions, are we not risking the stagnation of the entire medical profession? If nobody wants to be clinical director, the hospital falls apart.
That is a crucial challenge, and it highlights a fundamental misunderstanding of what career realignment actually means.
Okay, unpack that.
Identifying these pathologies does not mean the academic ladder is inherently toxic or that institutional leadership is a waste of human potential. We absolutely need brilliant academic surgeons.
We need people reading the spreadsheets.
Yes, we need dedicated clinical directors who fight for resources. The distinction, the core mechanism we are talking about today is alignment.
Alignment.
These definitions are only destructive when they are pursued by the specific person who does not genuinely value them.
I see. So it is about removing the friction of obligation, not destroying the infrastructure itself.
Precisely the opposite of destruction. Think about it. When an individual who truly values scientific discovery pursues the academic ladder, they do so with sustainable energy.
They can handle the setbacks.
They can weather the inevitable grant rejections because the work itself is intrinsically rewarding. But when an individual pursues that same ladder merely because it is the inherited default,
They do so with resentment.
exactly, they burn out and ultimately they produce a lower quality of contribution. If we strip away the professionals who are only in leadership or academia out of a misplaced sense of obligation, what happens?
We leave the system in the hands of people who actually want to be doing that job.
Exactly. People genuinely passionate about those specific roles. That does not weaken the profession. It vastly strengthens it.
That makes profound sense. The system works better when the people running it actually want to be there. So, identifying the wrong metric, realizing you're wearing that ill-fitting bespoke suit, is the crucial first step.
Yes.
But if we strip away these inherited frameworks, we tell that late 40s surgeon to stop measuring herself by her A index or her administrative titles. She is suddenly staring at a terrifying blank slate. Right. How does anyone begin to write their own definition from scratch? I mean, you cannot just tell a highly analytical clinician to go find their passion.
No, that is a useless platitude.
It is a platitude. We need a rigorous protocol.
A platitude is useless in clinical practice, and it is useless in career realignment. We need a diagnostic framework.
Right.
We need to administer a set of deeply uncomfortable, highly revealing questions designed to bypass all that professional conditioning and force the authentic definition of success to the surface.
Well, let us initiate that diagnostic workup right now. This feels like taking a very thorough, very invasive history from a complex patient who has been masking their symptoms for years.
That is exactly what it is.
What is the first angle of inquiry?
We start by trying to recover the pre-socialized self.
The pre-socialized self.
Yes. You have to force yourself to look backwards and ask, what did you intrinsically want before medical training systematically overwrote your desires with its own expectations?
So we are talking about retrieving the mindset of the 18 or 20-year-old who sat for the medical school interview.
Exactly. We are bypassing the medicalized brain entirely. We are going back to the version of you that existed before you knew the difference between a prestigious teaching hospital and a district general hospital.
Before you knew what an impact factor was.
Before you knew why you were supposed to care about it. The pre-training version of yourself had aspirations that were gradually, systematically overwritten by the culture of the wards.
Right.
Did you originally want to connect deeply with patients in a slow-paced rural setting? Did you want to invent physical devices? Did you want to teach anatomy?
But surely some of those early ideas were just naive.
Of course. Some of those early desires were undoubtedly naive and correctly abandoned as you matured. But hidden among the naivete are your core uncorrupted values.
I love that. Uncorrupted
And
values.
to find them, you have to look honestly at what you abandoned simply to fit the mold.
Which brings us to the second diagnostic angle. And this one ventures into quite uncomfortable psychological territory because it uses an emotion we are universally taught to suppress.
Envy.
Yes, envy. We need to treat envy as clinical data.
Envy is arguably the most powerful diagnostic tool we possess because it completely bypasses logic.
We bury it.
We feel deeply ashamed of it. But envy is pure, unfiltered information. The careers you secretly envy reveal your hidden, unacknowledged desires.
Give me an example.
If you feel a sharp, visceral pang of envy when a colleague announces they are dropping their clinical commitment to 2 days a week to run a vineyard or spend time with their children, that is crucial data.
And if someone gets a national role?
If you feel envy when someone is appointed to lead a national task force, that is data too. Physicians who actually interrogate their envy rather than just feeling guilty about it often discover they are starving for a way of working they had not allowed themselves to acknowledge.
Because it did not fit the inherited blueprint.
Hmm.
But I need to challenge the safety of using envy as a compass here. I mean, surgeons are notoriously competitive. How do we distinguish between toxic competitive jealousy, which is rampant, highly isolating, and generally miserable, and the informative envy you were describing?
That is a fine line.
Because if I am just jealous of every surgeon who has a bigger house or a more prominent title, following that feeling does not lead to authentic success. It just leads to a bigger mortgage and more anxiety.
That distinction is the linchpin of this entire exercise. Toxic jealousy is just your ego reacting to the peer comparison trap we discussed earlier.
Rooted in scarcity.
Yes, it is rooted in scarcity and status. It is the feeling of, I want what they have so that I can be perceived as better than them. Informative envy, on the other hand, points to a specific process, a way of working or living that resonates with your core values.
Let us ground that mechanism in an example so we can really see the difference.
Okay, imagine you see a colleague win a massive multi-million-pound research grant. If your immediate internal reaction is, I wish I had that grant so my CV looked as impressive as theirs and so the dean would respect me more.
That is toxic jealousy.
Exactly. You do not actually want to do the grueling administrative nightmare of managing the lab. You just want the outcome and the status.
Right.
But if you look at a colleague who leaves the hospital at exactly 5 p.m. every day without a shred of guilt because they deeply value their family time.
And you feel that ache.
Yes. If you feel a profound aching wish that you could construct your boundaries that way, that is informative envy. It is highlighting a critical deficit in your value alignment, not a deficit in your status.
That clarifies the mechanism beautifully. It is envying the process of someone's life versus envying the outcome or the optics.
Exactly right.
But even if you acknowledge that informative envy, there is still a psychological safety net we all use, the assumption of infinite time. We assume we can act on these desires eventually. How do we break through the delusion of the infinite timeline?
By artificially inducing professional mortality.
I like the sound of that.
You use the shortened horizon. You ask yourself a brutal question. What would you regret if your career abruptly ended next year?
Wow. That immediately strips away all the superficial metrics, doesn't it?
It forces a ruthless triage of your values. We operate as if we have decades to eventually get around to the things that actually matter. When you compress the timeline to 12 months, the absurdity of our daily optimizations becomes glaringly obvious.
That's true.
I mean, if you knew you only had 1 year left in clinical practice, would you really spend your Tuesday night agonizing over a third author publication in a mid-tier journal?
Absolutely not.
Would you care about chairing the hospital IT integration committee?
Definitely not.
The things you would genuinely regret missing out on: spending dedicated time mentoring a specific junior registrar, mastering a complex surgical approach you have always been fascinated by, or finally taking a sabbatical to decompress.
Those are the core values.
Those are the things that are actually aligned with your authentic definition of success.
It shifts the focus entirely from accumulation to legacy, which ties perfectly into the fourth diagnostic angle, evaluating character versus achievement.
This is a profound shift.
It is the shift from asking what do I want to have done to asking who do I want to have become. The entire medical apparatus is engineered to focus on achievement outcomes.
Papers published, procedures logged, grants won.
Exactly. These are the CV virtues. But the character outcome, the person you become as a colleague, as a leader under pressure, as a mentor, as a spouse, that is your actual legacy.
It is the difference between your CV virtues and your eulogy virtues.
Eulogy virtues. That is powerful.
When you finally retire, your colleagues are not going to sit around discussing your AIMS index or your gross billing revenue.
No, they will not even remember it.
They are going to talk about how you treated the scrub team when a case went catastrophic in theater. They will talk about whether you shielded your juniors from institutional politics or threw them under the bus.
Right.
If your operational definition of success does not explicitly include the character you wish to embody, you will easily achieve all the external metrics while slowly becoming someone you fundamentally despise.
And a large part of why we pursue the wrong metrics is because we are performing for the wrong people. This brings us to the fifth diagnostic angle, audience optimization.
Identifying the ghosts.
Yes, we need to dissect the ghosts that clinicians are trying to impress.
Well, human beings are profoundly social creatures. We are always optimizing our behavior for an audience.
It is natural.
It is. But the pathology in mid-career medicine is that physicians are exhausting themselves, optimizing for audiences they do not actually care about, or worse, audiences that do not even exist anymore. We're performing for ghosts.
Who are the ghosts? Give me some examples.
The primary ghost is often the old program director from your residency 20 years ago,
Oh, yes.
whose voice is still lodged in your basal ganglia telling you that shifting to private practice is selling out. It is the academic peers at international conferences, whose names you barely recall, but whose hypothetical judgment dictates what research you pursue. It is parental figures who equated your worth entirely with prestige, whose approval you are still subconsciously trying to earn.
So how do we treat this?
The diagnostic intervention here is identifying whose opinion actually matters.
And shrinking the audience.
Yes. If you narrow that audience down to your spouse, your children, 3 trusted colleagues, and your own internal compass, a tremendous amount of cognitive and emotional energy is instantly liberated. You stop performing the script.
Just acknowledging that the old program director is not actually watching you anymore is incredibly freeing.
They are not thinking about you at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there are very real, non-ghost factors that keep us trapped. Let us look at the 6th diagnostic tool, the money and status thought experiment.
This one is very revealing.
We ask, what would you do if money and status were removed from the equation? Now, I know the immediate pushback here from our listeners.
Which is,
We live in reality. We have mortgages. We have university fees for our kids. We have real-world responsibilities. We cannot just ignore money.
of course not. The point of the experiment is not to pretend we live in a post-scarcity utopia. Money and status are critical factors.
So what is the utility of the thought experiment then?
To map the gap between your genuine intrinsic desires and your financially or reputationally driven actions.
How does that look in practice?
If you magically removed the financial incentive and the prestige bump, would you still be doing that extra Saturday morning clinic?
Probably not.
Would you still be the lead investigator on that trial? The gap between what you would do without those variables and what you are currently doing shows you exactly how much of your professional life has been hijacked by extrinsic rewards.
That is a very stark way to look at it. And the final diagnostic question confronts a pervasive coping mechanism in medicine, the fallacy of later.
Oh, the fallacy of later is the ultimate infinite sacrifice script.
I hear it all the time.
I will slow down after I make consultant. I will spend more time with my family after I secure tenure. I will focus on my cardiovascular health after the kids are out of university.
It is a moving target that never, ever stops moving.
Because later is not a time, it is an avoidance mechanism.
That is profound.
Postponing your life until after some arbitrary professional milestone is a script that demands infinite sacrifice. Confronting this requires brutal honesty. Are these postponements deliberate, strategic choices with a fixed end date, or are they just a reflex?
Usually a reflex.
Realizing that the conditions for your ideal life will never be perfect and that later is actually right now is the necessary catalyst for change.
So, we have taken the history, we have asked the deeply uncomfortable questions, we have recovered the pre-socialized self, analyzed the envy, shortened the horizon, prioritized character over achievement, exorcised the ghosts, isolated the variables of money and status, and shattered the illusion of later.
A very thorough workup.
The listener has done the work. They have had their paradigm shift. They have a newly clarified, authentic definition of what success actually means for them.
Fantastic.
But insight without action is just a sophisticated form of psychological torment.
Absolutely.
Diagnosis without a treatment plan leaves the patient stranded in the clinic. How do we bridge this massive gap between internal reflection and external execution?
This is where it gets difficult.
Right. How does a mid-senior professional, deeply embedded in the complex bureaucratic machinery of a modern hospital system, actually pivot their reality? This takes us to the implementation protocol.
This is where the philosophical rubber meets the clinical road. You cannot just have a profound epiphany on a Sunday evening and expect your Monday morning trauma list to look any different.
It will be exactly the same.
We need a structural framework for restructuring a mature career. And the fundamental first step of that protocol is the clinical and administrative audit.
This feels analogous to treating a polypharmacy patient. You get an elderly patient admitted, and you look at their chart, and they are on 15 different medications prescribed by 6 different specialists over a decade.
Yes, a complete mess.
The first thing you do is not to add another drug. You do a massive medication review. You look at this sprawling list of prescriptions and ask, why is this patient still taking this? What is the actual current clinical indication? Is this drug just treating the side effect of another drug?
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism of the audit. Most mid to senior medical careers are suffering from severe administrative polypharmacy.
Administrative polypharmacy. I love that.
You take on a committee role in your early 30s because it seemed politically astute at the time, and a decade later, you are still sitting in that windowless boardroom every Thursday at 4 p.m. simply out of institutional inertia.
Right.
You have to evaluate every single commitment, your rota, your research obligations, your teaching sessions, your clinical focus.
Evaluate them against what?
Against your newly defined metrics of success. Does this specific block of time serve my authentic definition, or does it serve the inherited blueprint I am actively trying to discard?
And once you identify the superfluous commitments, you have to initiate the hardest step for any high-achieving clinician, high-leverage elimination.
Deprescribing.
Yes, you have to start deprescribing your life.
The power of stepping down cannot be overstated. You have to ruthlessly decline roles that you initially accepted for the wrong reasons.
Which feels unnatural to us.
Very. But you have to shed the energy-draining projects. Saying no, resigning from a subcommittee, gracefully bowing out of a research group where you are no longer adding core value. These are the highest leverage moves a professional can make to reclaim their autonomy.
But the psychological resistance to this is immense. Physicians are conditioned to equate busyness with importance.
We wear exhaustion as a badge of honor.
We really do. Saying no or stepping down from a leadership role feels like a structural failure. It triggers a deep-seated fear of becoming irrelevant.
It only feels like failure if you are still evaluating yourself using the old inherited metric.
Right.
If your new, authentic metric prioritizes clinical mastery and deep local mentorship over administrative power, then stepping down from the hospital finance committee is not a failure.
It is a victory.
It is a massive strategic victory. You are reclaiming the territory of your own mind.
But clearing the calendar is just creating a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does a hospital administration.
They will fill it instantly.
Right. If you do not actively protect that reclaimed time, the system will just fill it with new administrative garbage. This leads to the third step, investing for compound returns.
Exactly. You must aggressively reallocate those freed up resources, your time, your cognitive bandwidth, your emotional capacity,
Put them where?
into areas that genuinely serve your new definition. If your authentic definition of success involves mastering a highly complex niche surgical technique, you take the 4 hours a week you saved by quitting that pointless committee and you invest it in the cadaver lab.
You protect that time fiercely?
You spend it observing a master surgeon in another city. The focused investment in what genuinely matters produces massive compound returns over time. Diffusion of your energy across a dozen meaningless commitments produces nothing but chronic exhaustion.
It is the principle of concentration of force. And to protect that concentration, you need a new operating system for future choices. Step 4 is consistent decision-making.
Your new definition of success must become an absolute, rigid filter for the very next career opportunity that lands in your inbox.
So when the medical director asks you to lead a new clinical governance task force,
You do not instinctively say yes out of flattery or obligation.
right,
You run it through the filter. Does this serve what I actually want, or does it serve the ghost of my old program director? The clarity of the filter makes the decision algorithmically simple, even if delivering the no remains socially uncomfortable.
and we really need to examine that social discomfort because it brings us to step 5, managing disappointment.
This is where most people quit the process.
This is the primary friction point where most realignments fail. When you act on your own definition, you will inevitably disappoint people.
You cannot avoid it.
You will disappoint mentors who spent years grooming you for an academic path they revere. You will disappoint peers who still measure success by the old metrics and feel subconsciously threatened by your defection from the game.
It holds up a mirror to their own choices, which makes them uncomfortable.
Exactly. I want to use another medical analogy here to explain this friction. This systemic pushback feels exactly like taking a patient off a long-standing, high-dose corticosteroid.
Oh, the withdrawal phase.
The biological system has adapted to the exogenous hormone. When you start to taper it, the system experiences severe withdrawal symptoms. It fights back. It fiercely resists the change.
It goes into crisis.
Right. So when a senior mentor, someone who championed your early career, feels personally rejected by your pivot away from academia, How do you hold your ground without torching your professional network and destroying the relationships you have built?
The withdrawal analogy is incredibly precise. The system will experience withdrawal. The system will push back. Your mentor will almost certainly experience your shift in priorities as a subtle, implicit rejection of their own life choices.
So how do you manage that?
You manage this friction by anchoring yourself to a very hard truth. The alternative is infinitely worse.
Meaning?
The alternative is living the rest of your one and only career, dictated by their definition of success, solely to manage their emotional comfort.
Which is madness.
That is an absolutely unacceptable trade-off for your life.
But the mechanism of communication matters. How do you actually deliver the news to them?
Through transparent, deeply empathetic, but unyielding communication, you do not burn the bridge, you redefine the traffic that crosses it.
I like that. Redefine the traffic.
You sit down with them and say, I am profoundly grateful for the guidance you have given me in academic research. It shaped who I am. However, after deep reflection, I have realized that my greatest impact and personal fulfillment comes from direct patient care and local clinical mentorship. I am pivoting my focus there to be the best clinician I can be.
You make it about your values, not a critique of theirs.
You frame it as a positive, values-driven move towards your authentic self rather than a negative rejection of their domain. And crucially, during this withdrawal phase, you must lean on a small accountability anchor.
Like a spouse or a friend.
Yes, a spouse, a trusted peer, someone who understands your new metrics and can remind you why you made the change when the institutional pressure tries to drag you back into the old mold.
That accountability anchor is the tether that keeps you from drifting back when the guilt sets in.
And it will set in.
And finally, step 6 of the protocol, the timeline of transition.
Yeah.
We need to set realistic clinical expectations for this treatment plan.
We must acknowledge the physical reality of a medical career. You cannot unspool a complex professional web that took 20 years to build over a single bank holiday weekend.
It is not going to happen overnight.
It requires immense strategic patience. You cannot simply walk into the clinic tomorrow, drop all your administrative duties, abandon a multi-year grant, and expect the system to adapt instantly.
That would be negligent.
Exactly. The transition takes years. It is the slow, deliberate turning of a very large ship. You make the micro adjustments, you finish out the legacy obligations you must, you stop taking on new misaligned projects, and you gradually, organically reshape the practice.
I think that is a vital point to emphasize. Before anyone listening to this deep dive rushes into the hospital tomorrow morning to dramatically hand in their resignation, flip a desk, or abandon their patients, we need to administer a heavy dose of perspective.
Let us de-escalate a bit.
Right. This framework can easily be misinterpreted as a call to professional nihilism. Let us move to Section 4, Managing Complications and Clarifications. Because redefining success does not mean destroying your career.
Exactly. The goal is profound intentionality, not reckless destruction. The first major clarification is this. Defining your own success rarely means abandoning the work.
It is not about quitting medicine to open an artisanal bakery in the Cotswolds.
Almost never. For the vast majority of physicians, redefining success does not mean leaving the profession or shirking clinical responsibility. It means becoming a different, more internally aligned kind of clinician.
Changing the how, not the what.
It means fundamentally changing how you work, not whether you work. You might stay in the exact same orthopedic department, in the exact same hospital, but you shift your primary internal motivation from publishing papers to teaching the next generation of surgeons.
You're still there.
You remain a dedicated clinician. You just operate under a different, healthier set of internal rules.
The second clarification addresses the guilt mechanism. It is not selfish. I think a lot of doctors operate under a martyr complex.
We absolutely do.
They feel that focusing on their own fulfillment is a direct betrayal of the altruistic ethos of medicine.
That martyr complex is a systemic disease that ultimately serves no one, least of all the patients. An aligned, fulfilled physician is systematically better for patient outcomes, better for departmental morale, and better for the institution than a hollow, resentful, burned-out shell of a doctor.
100%.
The physician practicing under a definition of success that actually fits their values has more cognitive patience, makes sharper clinical decisions, and creates a psychologically safer environment for the entire multidisciplinary team. Finding your alignment is a professional obligation to your patients. It is not a selfish indulgence.
The third complication is the trap of perfectionism, accepting imperfect clarity. I imagine highly analytical surgeons get paralyzed here.
Paralysis by analysis. Right. They run through the diagnostic questions, they look for the clear binary X-ray showing them their true purpose, but they do not receive a lightning bolt of perfect clarity. So they default to doing nothing. You cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. Your new definition of success does not need to be perfect.
It will evolve.
It will probably be partial, it will be messy, and it will absolutely be subject to revision as you age and your life circumstances change. That is completely normal.
Just getting started is enough.
A deliberate, albeit partial, definition of success is still vastly superior to an unexamined, inherited one. You do not need absolute crystalline certainty to start making positive, directional adjustments to your rota.
Which brings us to the final clarification. Micro-adjustments versus dramatic change. Not every career realignment requires a spectacular cinematic pivot.
Absolutely not. Sometimes a clinician will go through this entire exhaustive audit process and realize, to their surprise, that they are actually largely on the right path.
That they actually like the academic ladder.
Yes. They genuinely love the academic ladder, or they thrive in their leadership role. In those cases, the necessary intervention is merely maintenance and refinement.
Small tweaks.
It might just be about dropping one toxic committee or carving out one protected afternoon a month for deep research. It is not always about burning the house down. Often, it is just about rearranging the furniture to better suit how you actually live and work.
Let us synthesize the core mechanism of everything we have discussed today. What we are really talking about is a fundamental shift in the locus of control.
From external to internal.
Yes. It is about moving from being a passive recipient of the medical culture's default expectations to becoming the active, deliberate architect of your own professional reality.
That is the whole point.
The ultimate goal is intentionality. Whether that introspection leads to a dramatic career pivot or just a quiet micro-adjustment in your weekly schedule, the victory is in the deliberation itself. The victory is finally knowing why you are doing what you are doing.
That is the cure for feeling unmoored.
As we draw this deep dive to a close, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, somewhat provocative concept to mull over on your next commute.
Leave them with something to think about.
We spent our entire medical training and a good portion of our early careers desperately trying to build a CV that is perfectly legible to the people above us. We want it to be instantly recognizable, categorizable, and universally validated as successful.
Standard blueprint.
But what if the ultimate mark of success in a mature medical career is not possessing the most impressive, easily categorized CV? What if true success is having a career that is completely illegible to the traditional inherited metrics of your peers, yet deeply functionally and perfectly tailored to you?
That is a profound paradigm shift to end on. The work of defining your own success is incredibly hard.
It is not a quick fix.
No, it is invisible. It is socially uncomfortable, and it requires sustained courage. But the version of yourself 20 years from now, the one looking back at the totality of your professional life, will be profoundly grateful that you chose to do this hard work today, rather than defaulting to the easiest path.
If this deep dive helped you view your career trajectory in a new light, or if it sparked a necessary moment of reflection, please take a moment to rate Deep Dive Ortho and share it with a colleague who might need to hear it today.
It could be exactly what they need.
Thank you for your time, for your ongoing dedication to your practice, and for your active participation in this thought experiment. We'll see you next time.